Okay, and we're back recording. Okay, let's keep going. Who's next? I can't even remember. Did I say Sarah?
I think it was going to be me, if that's okay with everybody.
You bet.
I read the entire book. I found it very difficult, and I had to read it. I read not each one, but many of them. I had to just read through several times. I'm on the road, as I mentioned, and I did forget to bring my copy with me, so my references won't be as specific, but that's okay, because the book was hard to read for me, because it's so powerful and graphic and powerfully written, that with the sexual and the colonial and the references to the residential schools and so many other things that we were talking earlier about white fragility, and of course, I'm old enough that I'm not really afraid to feel that and admit that I'm feeling it. And I wouldn't say it was that, but it was just, I almost had to turn myself off, my own self, and just become a vessel to let the poems come into me. Because if I put any of my own personal filters on, they started to feel very painful and difficult, almost like to challenge white fragility. And I've had a million times I wanted to kind of just be outraged. And then like you said, Vanessa, it's not the time for me to be outraged. It's the time for me to listen and learn. And reading that book was almost like sitting, like being a fly on the wall in a room where people were discussing things that were very painful for me to hear, but it was not my pain to be focused on. And I just had to be the fly on the wall. That said, I also found a lot of humor in the book. Especially, I found that Lee's poems resonated the most, and I wondered if that's just because I'm older, and I know that the younger, her daughters, of course, are younger, but the one she read about, we don't fall in love, we rise, and I had to laugh, and the landing being farther is like, yep, got that. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. One thing I did notice is that the two sisters wrote the same poem with different spacing, and I can't remember what it was called now, but one of them was on page 45, I think, and it's the exact same words, but it's different breakups. And I didn't know, I tried to figure out what that meant, and I couldn't figure it out. And I realized it's not very helpful for me to throw that out there without my book to actually reference it. But if anyone else noticed it and has thoughts on what that was, I would love to hear it. But anyway, I was really happy to read that book. That is a book I would never have read, in another life. And it was deeply moving. And I feel like it is still sinking in.
That's fair. Love it. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I guess I am next. I agree with what both Sarah and Vanessa have said. Poetry is also difficult for me, and I also needed time to digest all of the lovely words. It was so visceral, a lot of the poems. It's really, I find it very effective to hear Lee read the poetry too, because that's an easier way to digest and then feel the poems. But the first one that she read, or that Columpa wrote, was about Hope Matters, where hope lives inside the artist. That really obviously meant a lot to me, because I am an artist, so it spoke to me a lot. And then also the one that Lee wrote, Justice is an Ember, on page 77, I thought was so beautiful.
I think we're all attracted to that one, aren't we?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and of course for Trayvon Martin, just
Yes.
cause tears, especially I think now in these days, especially. It was so moving. But also the poem someone previously mentioned about innocence is bleeding. That is on page 1. Yeah, anyway, I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual trauma, so that also was quite impactful for me too. So that's all I have to say about it.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Kat.
You
And
bet.
these are hard topics, so thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I think it's me now. Yeah.
I think so.
I read just over half of them, or listened to just over half of them. Poetry is not my go-to in terms of reading. On the other hand, when I do go to poetry, or I'm at events where people are reading poems, I find there's something about poetry that can be very impactful. I don't know, it's like things are not, I don't want to say consolidated, but concentrated, right? It's concentrated, and so it can really impact you. And I also loved the one about justices in Amber, and what she talked about in there in terms of hope. And it really reminded me a lot of, I think I've talked about this movie already with this group, Just Mercy. Did I talk about that? About the Black lawyer, from Harvard educated Black lawyer who went down south to be a director for a legal clinic that worked with prisoners on death row. And at the end of the movie, he had several, in court, he said several things about hope. And one of them was that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, because I often have friends and others who say to me, how do you remain hopeful? Well, it's like, well, what is the alternative?
Yeah.
In my mind. And it also reminds me of, I can't remember her name, a Black feminist academic from the States. I'll remember, but she came up here and spoke and was asked, how did she keep going? How do people keep going? And this was after, revolutions are being turned around, right? In Nicaragua and Iran and the rest. And she just said, only the privileged can afford to be cynical, right? If you're oppressed, cynicism is such a deadly enemy and so dysfunctional. So it's only the privileged sits and worries about these things. One thing that really struck me, there were a series of poems at the beginning that were just beautiful in their sensuality, and the body is a place of great pleasure. And then, right, then you move from that to other poems where the body is
Abused.
havoc is being wreaked upon the body, and the pain that comes with that, and that juxtaposition. And I think, maybe I misheard things, but I felt as if what's happened to women's bodies also becomes a metaphor for what's happened to a whole culture, right? In terms of what colonialism and imperialism and capitalism have done, right, to Indigenous peoples. And though I really appreciated the poem where she refuses to be a victim, right? Refuses to be a victim of these things and to move forward. And then on a very personal note, there was a poem called Still. And I think it was a poem about people who were older, and they still found so much pleasure in each other on that physical, sensual contact level. Yeah. So that's all I'll say for now.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm glad you did.
Nice. Yeah, it's so much. I just even, so from the beginning, the concept of how this book is, how it even originated, I love how the culture is already there from the very beginning, like the way of approaching making this text. And then I had read Conversations with Canadians at the Settler Book Club, and from that point I just loved Lee Maracle. I went to see her when she came to Calgary, and then I just loved her even more hearing her like oral language, right? So then when I got this, I'm like, let me see if I can hear her reading it. So I did exactly what you did, where I was like, I need to hear her actually speaking this, because that's the way. And yeah, and then I researched, because I wanted to see reviews, like, so what are people saying about this? And honestly, I didn't find very much. I might have found, Sarah, maybe you left a review. I might have found, there was a review by someone who said they were reading it for a book club in Treaty 7. So I was like, oh, maybe that's someone.
That was me. I left it on Goodreads.
Okay.
I always review books when I finish them on Goodreads, just for my own, so I can go back, because I find I literally will forget that I even read a book sometimes if it's been 2 years or something. So I always write reviews for myself. So yes, if anybody wants to read mine, it's on Goodreads.
So anyway, but yours actually was like the most substantial review that I could find. And a lot of like the synopsis is like, it's going from colonialization to reconciliation. And when I read this book, that does not capture this book at all. It's just the most superficial take on it possible. Like, did you miss the entire first part of the book? Like, it's not starting at colonialization at all, right? It's starting from like what could be, what was there, and then how it got destroyed. And anyway, and then the justice, those 2 poems about justice, I really resonated with me. And the Trayvon Martin, I just, knowing Maya Angelou and Still I Rise, and hearing the cadence of the poem, Maya Angelou's poetry in this poem, honoring a Black person who was murdered, right? So it just, to me, again, shows like that inclusivity of Indigenous people, where they can bring people together and still honor it, not like replace it, not colonize it, right? But like honor it and do that in such a beautiful way, like just so yeah. And then Vanessa, don't worry, I don't know, I'm a native English speaker, and it was still really hard for me. So I don't know if it's because you're ELL, honestly. There's a lot of, even sometimes I was like, well, who is, like, in My Roots Are Bleeding, I'm like, well, who is my? Exactly, like, who is my supposed to be? Is that a person? Is that the earth? Is that like, so.
I know it's abstract sometimes, and sometimes it's not, hey?
Yeah, or like you, so who is you supposed to be, those kind of things.
Sure.
Yeah, and just the themes that I was noticing that really resonated with me, the theme of a breath, and then using your voice and being heard, and of justice, and yeah, not just kind of the, I'm refusing to be tragic, right? So refusing to let other people define you as a helpless, right? Like you might be a victim, but that doesn't mean that you're helpless. But that's what people try to kind of do to marginalize people, right? Like they're just tragic, and therefore they can be seen as something like you don't have to really deal with it, not like a living person. Yeah,
Dehumanize.
so anyway, I just love Lee Maracle. So I researched before, she does courses, right, at the U of T, and I really want to take one of her courses. Like, That would be a dream of mine, to take one of her courses and like sit and just listen from her, because yeah, when she introduced her granddaughter there, wasn't that so sweet?
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you just, yeah. Oh,
I know,
I'm
but
sorry, I'm babbling on, but I have one more thing that I.
yeah, do.
So there's a poem called Sharma, and that also I found really touching. Of like, well, I work in a school that has a high South Asian population, specifically Sikh, and like just thinking of some of these boys, yeah, and just even with Black Lives Matter and how we have police in schools, and just thinking of the interactions with some of these kids who are getting into criminal activities, and what are we really doing to help them. And so this poem really resonated. And the line of children save each other from being alone, desperate and ashamed of being so brown. You had such beautiful eyes and full eyelashes, wanted to drown in them, take them out onto the ocean, swimming thousands of miles from every shore. Like, just so beautiful. Yeah.
Well, obviously everybody read the Traylon one, so I guess we don't have to redo that one. But I think just because again, voices, we've been talking about this for over 4 years. And then to read that, and then in the moment of literal civil war in the States, like, it was just such a strong moment. But the one that really like resonated with me, actually I'll do the one that kind of made me feel like this is why I do this book club. And it was after the stories clears, who will pay for the headstones? Because one of my uncles that did go to Indian residential school, he has passed. And you know, he didn't have like addiction issues or anything like that, but he was extremely overweight. And he was working in China, and he came home and he was having teeth issues. And because he had just such a short window from when he was in Canada to when he would go back to China, he really tried to work on a dentist to put him under. And they said, with your health issues, we just don't feel comfortable. But they did, finally, he convinced them, and he died. And I always think about, like, if he wouldn't have went to Indian residential school, how different would his life have looked? So, I went up to bury him in 2000, and not just me, like, so I have lots of aunts and uncles, and one of my uncles lives here in Calgary, and we all went up, and I was in the same truck as my cousins, and we all went up to Yellowknife. And my two uncles, we stopped in Edmonton, and then my two uncles just kept changing of who would drive, and we went in 24 hours. We drove from Calgary all the way to Yellowknife. So, and at the time we there was a wooden cross that for my one uncle, and they have since replaced it with a headstone. And I always think, like, that was a burden my family, you know, who pays for the headstones. And I remember sitting in my auntie's cabin when all the brothers and sisters were sitting together around the table with my granny, and they were talking about the costs, and they were just figuring it out, and it was easy. And I was with all the young cousins, because I'm still I was the oldest, but I was still just, you know, that generation. And for a lot of my cousins, it was the first time we ever met, actually, and some of them didn't even know I existed. So it was really wild. And so it's just kind of, it brought all of that up reading this, because I was thinking about when we buried my uncle. But the one that I really like, I just feel like Lee wrote this for me, and it's on page 109, and it's honesty is a thorny rose, because it's basically about, like, this whole book is that truth. It's nothing about reconciliation. It's all about truth to me. And when we speak our truth, you know, truth is relevant. It will live forever, like steam evaporating. Honesty is transparency, illuminating the mom and dad, showing slideshow parenting is. Like, it's perfect. And it's like when you speak your truth, so many people don't like it. But I love the way she ended it. Before I am honest, I want to witness the beauty of a lie. And I don't know how many times I've sat in a meeting and, you know, heard politicians or somebody who thinks they're important say something, some bullshittery, poetic bullshit. And then I'll just kind of wait and let them finish and then say a truth. And it just changes the entire room, where it feels like everybody got hit in the stomach. And I don't mean it to. It's just that sometimes words and truth is just too much for people. Like a beautiful rose, I guess you can't hold all of them, right? So it just this entire book, I mean, there are really hard ones to read, and some of this I hate that it's such a shared experience between different Indigenous people, and quite frankly between all people. I mean, sexual assault, unfortunately, is such a normalized thing for so many women. Hey, sweetie, good to see you. Glad you're here. I was really proud of you. I was like a proud auntie taking a video of you speaking, just so you know. Yeah, we were really proud of you. So yeah, this entire book was so good, and there are parts of it that I just love to pieces. So yeah, we only have like 10 minutes. Darn it. I want to keep talking forever, but for our next one, what do I want to say? That there's it's just one. It's the TRC part for youth. I want to say it's number 66. But I got to tell you this backstory before we go anywhere, because yeah, I got all the TRCs behind me, and they have their own stories behind all of the calls to action in the different series. But there's a Métis woman on Twitter, and literally her job is to go through the TRC and be focused and honest about what she's seeing. Her name is Gabrielle Fayette. She came across this one that we're about to do, 66. I'm going to ask her if she can come on, because they came across it. It was like millions and millions and millions of dollars that the government so-called invested into the youth for reconciliation. But like 99% of it went into RCMP youth programs, but that nobody has any accountability to.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I'm like, what?
Yeah, what?
So like, that's obviously our next book club, where we have to actually research that call to action anyway. And so I just wanted to throw that at you in case you've seen that, like at the very least read what she wrote. But I'll contact her and see if she wants to pop into our book club, into our Zoom meeting, and see. I wish I could pay her and just tell her, like, we're talking about this call to action, and if you took the full 2 hours, we'd all be tickled pink, frankly. So, you know, I'm going to ask her. She might not be able to come. So if that's the case, then just know that, you know, it wasn't from a lack of not wanting her here. That's for sure.
What is her name again, Michelle?
Gabrielle Fayette. I could probably write it. Can you see the chat at all?
I can't. I haven't figured that one out yet.
Oh, that's okay. Okay.
How do you spell her last name?
I'm just kind of typing it to make sure I get it right, but I think it's Fayant.
Okay.
And I was following her on Twitter, and she called it out. So I think she's really becoming one of the stronger Indigenous voices on Twitter. So that's good. So I've been trying to retweet her a lot more. And anyway, she I can't remember what organization she works for, but it's like a youth style organization, Indigenous youth organization. And she was researching that and came across it. And I was just like, those dirty jerks, you know, you give money. Really, what are you giving money for? You're really giving money to the RCMP. And that's the whole thing. Like, we gotta be really, they're so shady, the government, with what they do and what they call reconciliation. Hey, so I mean, clean drinking water, oh no, but lots of millions to the RCMP, no problem. If there was ever an argument to defund the police, I think it's in the next call to action. Yeah. So yeah, I'll contact her, and I'll contact you too, Crystal, and just we'll see what we can come up with here, and see if we can convince her that it might be worth her time in the middle of July to come on a 2-hour Zoom call. So, and I just wanted to double check everybody was okay with still meeting in July and August. Okay, I don't have any holidays planned, but
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Yeah.
I had tickets to go home. And
Oh.
yeah. So I'll be here.
I just heard on the radio they were talking about August of reopening flights to Mexico.
Yeah, mine is exactly like the 15th to the 29th.
Oh,
So
shoot.
I won't make it.
That's too bad. Well, hopefully that will get figured out though. And I'm hoping there's not a huge second wave. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah.
Or a huge second something or third something that's different. It's like the hits just keep on coming this year.
Right? And I've been telling people, my aunt and uncle from Yellowknife called me. They were like, we're seeing the pictures from Calgary, Michelle. And I'm like, you're not going to believe this is like literally a block north. And it was just from that point north is where all of those hails, like whatever falls hit, and just shredded the Northeast and just I'm too forest lawn for them, I guess.
Good one.
Oh, just barely, but I feel so bad for my neighbors because I ran provincially and municipally, so people would friend me and I literally never interact with them, but I get to see all of the horrific like pictures that are coming through. And I mean, like, it was so strong that it broke the windows on their cars, in their houses. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So yeah, and I don't want to say, what else could possibly happen, because I don't know who's saying that, but quit saying that. Whoever's saying it, quit it. I seen a meme, and do any of you watch that cartoon called Ice Age? No? They have this like silly squirrel, and he's always chasing an acorn, and whenever he chases an acorn, it like ruins the entire planet. So I shared this one meme, and it was like, I don't know what is happening in 2020, but we're pretty sure this guy has something to do with it. So
yes, I do know that squirrel.
Yeah, that squirrel.
I've seen that squirrel now that you mention it.
Yeah. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say, I think on Thursday I'm part of a panel discussion to talk about racism and parenting. But even if you can't make it, there's apparently a whole Sesame Street episode, and I've only seen a small clip of Elmo's dad talking to Elmo, but I've been wanting to sit down and watch the whole Sesame Street episode that is specific. And even on I follow like Black leaders in New York City, and I didn't see one person say a negative thing about the Sesame Street episodes. So I'm going to sit down and watch the whole thing, and I just wanted to throw that out to you all. So how did it get to be 8:25 already? Kat, I wanted to ask you real quick, did you get a chance to go to any of the Black Lives Matter marches?
Yes, I went to the one at Olympic Plaza, the vigil on the Saturday. I was able to go after work. And yeah, I was wondering if y'all were there too. I saw Michelle had posted some video of where she was and stuff. But yeah, I tried to stay at the back away from everybody.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much for the invitation to the Cochrane one. I'm going to take a pass on that, unfortunately, because I have to do some elder care with my dad. So I want to try and stay as low risk as possible. So yeah, but thank you. I will send, it was on Sunday, wasn't it? The 14th. Yeah, that was it.
It was amazing. I cried. Like, I was crying tears of joy. I mean, there was a bit of a win, but it was actually probably more emotional. And I did
You can watch the videos. Yeah.
Yeah, I posted a bunch of videos, but unfortunately in the middle of Dora's, it cut out. Like, I ran out of battery power. And then and there was a couple of speakers after that I wish I would have had more battery power for. And then the last speaker, Vanessa, can I ask you about the last speaker?
Yes. I invited Taylor McNally. to the because she's doing the rural Alberta against racism, and I invited her as a speaker, and she said that there was another person who wanted to speak who was from her team, and Taylor invited her, so I had no idea
Yeah.
what her message was, and yeah, so those things happen, right? When you're organizing and you have no control over the messages. I did a few apologies around that, but
Really? Hey? So it wasn't just me, because I was like, you know how we were talking about David Chappelle earlier? And I was like, am I being that person? Am I not hearing what she's saying? Because she kind of came across as some kind of like a performer from New York who's used to doing performance as opposed to and attacking white supremacy in a like it and she kind of contradicted herself at times and said things like, you know, my name is this, but it's not really that because KKK wants me. And then on the other hand, she'd say, but I'm not afraid of anybody. And I'll be like, okay, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, she actually had to apologize to a family, to an Indigenous family that was there, because she brought up the name of an elder who has recently passed, and his family was there. So the family approached me and said, like, you know, we are very offended, or someone is really offended about that, because in our culture, in our tradition, the first year you should not bring a name up after a passing, and we would like to speak to her. And I said absolutely, and they talked, and I think she apologized, and but yeah, no, you weren't the only one.
Yeah, it was getting to the point where I had to go anyway, so I was like I was trying not to be critical or judgmental, because like we all come from a place of trauma sometimes, and she had a lot of things to say, so
A lot, like 25 minutes thing. But you know, I mean, you know, I also think that speakers like are going for different audiences.
Yep.
So you never know what's gonna be appealing for people. So I like, you know, diversity of delivery. Just like teachers, right? You have different teachers. So I mean,
Yeah.
it was a very positive rally overall.
It was, and I don't want to take away from it in any way, shape, or form. And that last particular speaker, I just I thought, I've literally never heard of her. And when she mentioned probably who I'm thinking she mentioned, and that was what offended the family and such, I was like, ugh, I do not know this woman, and I'm surprised she would say something like this. So anyway, I had a really great time, and Adora came and approached me after, as did you too, Vanessa, and I just felt really connected to everybody and felt whole and felt hopeful, and that's the whole point of the book club tonight. So I can't thank you all enough. It's a beautiful night, and you took the time to be here, and it's our 4th anniversary, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate every single one of you for attending tonight, and always, actually. You like, this is a pretty hardcore group that's come, and somehow I've lost a few of the others, and I hope that we can get them back. But you know, it's hard, and we've had to adapt, right? When I left 12 CSI, when the library jammed out on us, like it hasn't been without its barriers, for sure, but yet we still kind of try to keep plowing through. So next time is that call to action, and I probably should double check that it's 66 before I leave you with that one. I think you all kind of know where we're at, but I just should quickly double check just to make sure I didn't give you the wrong one to do. It's the pin post on the Indigenous Pride with 12 CSI. I know, Rosemary, that you're not on Facebook, so that's why I want to look it up right now, just to make sure I don't mislead you. So, yep, 66 is youth programs. When I was researching some of the sports calls to action, I kind of came across a lot more youth information through the series of the TRC. So I'll try to find some pieces there to, you know, bring attention to as well, so that hopefully we can do that. And I'll approach Gabriel and see if she can join us to talk about some of her findings with the work that she does in the organization she's with. And with that, folks, I want to keep talking forever, but I'm already at least a minute over our time. So thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Michelle.
Oh.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Take-
everyone. It
Thanks,
was so nice to
Vanessa.
meet you.
Yeah.
Take
So
care.
glad you could
Keep
join
well.
us there, even
Yeah.
though you're traveling. Thank you, everybody,
Yes.
for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'll see you in a month.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Yay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye,
Michelle.
everybody. Be
Bye,
safe.
Keep well.
everybody.
And
See you next week,
congratulations
Kat.
on 4 years. Here's to another 25 more. And I'm really honored to be part of it.
Right on. Thanks, Kat, so much. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
I don't know
Bye,
how to get out
everybody.
of this. How do we get out? There we go.
All right. I'll end it for everybody. Bye, everybody. Bye, Kat.